let's be honest, 90% of that time was devoted to playing App Store downloaded video games, mobile games to be exact. And oh boy, that is an ecosystem that I would give my left nut to be able to live in again. The innocence, the ignorance, the sheer beauty of being a kid in the early 2010s with an iPad is something that Gen Z would kill to have a fleeting moment to experience. What do I mean by that? If you know, you know. But for those who haven't been honored with that honor, I'll explain. So there were trends. There were pop culture defining moments hinging on releases of certain mobile apps at the time. It was a different marketplace. It was the time that we thought smartphones could do anything and were fascinated by the most minimalistic, incredibly stupid gimmicks that our phones and our tablets and our sometimes even laptops could do. I remember this was just, I have vivid memories, man, of family functions, family reunions, even just, talking with my immediate family in the living room when everybody was on their couch watching TV. There was these stupid one-time gimmick apps that were incredible. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, given the time period and because, at the time we thought, our smartphones, it was, at the time, Siri was considered like this groundbreaking, like, oh my God, Harlan Ellison was right. Technology is finally advanced and peaked, blah, blah, blah. We thought Siri was like the biggest, accomplishment that mankind would have created. And I remember just showing my aunts, my uncles, these stupid effing apps on my phone. It was like a beer app. I don't know how to explain it. It was just this really crummy PNG of like a glass pitcher of beer. And the only function that stupid app had is that due to the, motion detecting, I'm not a technology expert. I don't know what that thing is called. But you would tilt your phone and a sound effect would emit from the speakers indicating that, oh, look, you're tipping away the beer. The beer is spilling out. And then the PNG of the beer would just slowly flatten. And then when you tilted it back to normal rotation, it would fill up again. The gimmick being that you can simulate that you're drinking beer with your phone. There was also, a lighter. It was just a lighter. You would just click it and a little flashy spark would come by and then a small flame would start emitting from this, once again, creamy. I don't even think it was like 3D. It was like a stupid cartoon 2D PNG of a lighter. And you could pretend like, oh, look, hey, Aunt, do you want me to light your cigarette? And I would just bust out that app. And I was the hit of the party. But that wasn't what 2010's mobile app nostalgia was built on. We're talking about the classics. I'm going to talk about Doodle Jump. Now, what was Doodle Jump, you might ask? If you know, you know. But if you don't, I'll be here to tell you. Doodle Jump was basically this incredibly simple game that basically kneeled before the requirements of what it took to be popular in the App Store at the time. Simple, addictive, but not hard enough to a point that it would alienate the casual consumer. Doodle Jump was just basically this alien dude with like a noodle for like a mouth. And you would tilt your phone for him to jump from platform to platform. There wasn't any controls on the actual screen. There wasn't, a D-pad and whatnot. There wasn't a pause button. Well, there was actually a pause button. That's a lie. But you would just tilt your phone, and then the technology of the phone would register the movement and have the little dude moving from left to right. And you would have to make it so that he needed to hop on different platforms so you could get to the top. There wasn't a definitive end to Doodle Jump. It was basically an endurance test. See how long you can go. See how far you can get up this podium. And then the more you got up, the better chances you had of getting your hands on some power-ups, like a little spring or like a costume. Or the best power-up that Doodle Jump had, it had a rocket launcher that would propel you like 1,000,000 kilometers up top and then land you back onto a platform so you could continue. Additionally to that, you had Fruit Ninja. Fruit Ninja you've definitely heard about because it took off 3 times more than Doodle Jump did. Fruit Ninja, to this day, is one of, I would say it seems to have been much more timeless and has stood the test of time, considering the different variations and adaptations and even ports that it's had on different consoles. Fruit Ninja was basically this really simple swiping application that would register, touchscreen technology with your finger, and you would just slice fruit that would be hurled to the screen, and you would just have to avoid the bombs. Don't slash the bombs, slash the fruits. And there were different variations. I remember there was the original mode of Fruit Ninja. You did have different lives that were in stake, where if you left some of the fruit uncut while it hurtled back down to the ground, one of your lives would deteriorate, and you would have 3 lives per level. And if you hit one of the bombs, you would just game over. You would lose that round. But I remember there being a Zen mode where there wasn't any bombs, but there was a time limit for it. It was 2 minutes of just slicing fruit and just seeing how many points you had. Additionally, there was also, what was the Endless. And as the name would suggest, the Endless mode was pretty much endless. The only way to have that game ended or ruined is to see if you hit a bomb. I can't remember if the game also had a definitive ending or if you were disqualified if you left enough fruits uncut. I don't really remember the specifics of it. But Fruit Ninja was so big at the time that it allowed it to be ported onto major consoles, such as the Xbox 360 for Kinect. I think Doodle Jump also had a variation on Kinect. Instead of just tilting your phone, you would just have to tilt your body from left and right. It was stupid. But Fruit Ninja actually translated fairly well for Kinect. Instead of swiping your fingers, you had to swipe your arms left and right. And it allowed for local multiplayer. And it wouldn't be that complicated. You would just ask somebody to jump in because, the way Kinect worked, it was a computer that you would hook up to your Xbox 360 atop your TV, and it would register your physical, bodily, corporal, movement because it was an IR camera at the end of the day. So you could, I think the limit was 2. I don't remember. Well, there wasn't really even a limit because the Kinect would just register your entire body and just create a silhouette in front of the screen to indicate that was you so that you can know what you were hitting. So it was slice, 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 slice. But the Kinect would just read your movement as if you're slicing, there's going to be the blade popping up on screen, therefore you can cut the fruit. So you can just have 4 different people on screen, and all of them can just be hauling ass with their arms. Damn it, Sart. This is Miles Morales from Spider-Verse. We must dignify him. He cannot be knocked over. Hold on. It would be so much fun breaking out that game during family functions because it was incredible. It was incredibly simple. Anybody could enjoy it. Additionally, you got Angry Birds. 2 movies. Endless animated shorts. A collaboration with a major Blue Sky Animated Studios movie from 2011. Rio. Just imagine how successful a franchise has to be that a major animation studio offers to collaborate in creating a brand new mobile game from scratch just to have your name on it. There was a variation of Angry Birds called Angry Birds Rio. Exact same premise. Instead of killing pigs, you had to basically kill whatever whatever canonical villain or threat the Rio movie posed. The first couple of levels were you freeing some of the birds. So instead of like little pigs that you had to kill with the birds with special, powers linked to each and every single one of them, you would have to knock over the obstacles so you could destroy these metal cages, and then the birds could fly away. After the couple of levels, I remembered the main villains from Rio, the first Rio at least, were the dancing monkeys. I don't really remember if they had a specific name. I don't even remember the name of any of them, to be honest. But they were the equivalent of the pigs. They weren't pigs, they were monkeys. And I believe certain characters were also playable as throwable, slingable objects off of the iconic Angry Birds slingshot mechanism. So it wasn't just, red, yellow, blue, and bomb, and the mighty eagle, if you know what I mean. If you know, you know. You could also sling across the slingshot to one of the obstacles, Blue and Jewel. I think Blue and Jewel were playable as well. That's just insane to me. And also, unfortunately, Angry Birds Rio is off of the App Store now, and the only real way to play it is if you have a copy of Angry Birds Trilogy on a console. It's the one game in existence that still manages to keep the Angry Birds Rio dream alive, as Scott Wozniak once said. It was insane. At the time, it was like a match made in heaven. It was 2011. The Rio movie was coming out. It was a bright, colorful movie with birds. And then you contrast it with the internet, where we were losing our minds over bright, colorful birds games. Then you got other variations like Angry Birds Star Wars, Angry Birds Star Wars 2, Angry Birds Space, Angry Birds Seasons, which is basically like the original Angry Birds, but you have like different environments and obstacles themed after different seasons: winter, autumn, summer. And unlike the original Angry Birds game on mobile, this one actually had much more consistent updates. I remember counting down to the day when a specific, season would be unlocked, because I thought it was so cool that it was like, oh my God, there's going to be a new season unlocked, August 31st, it's going to be summer. And, you would have the Angry Birds characters. They would always have cutscenes, like really crummy, rudimentary PNGs of all the characters with like crappy little, sunglasses or, beach hats or beach balls next to the beach. And you would have the pigs stealing their eggs. And it was like, oh, look, it's the same thing, but it's summer, it's winter, it's Christmas, and blah, blah, blah. It was insane. I can't really remember any franchise that really reached the heights of popularity. Franchise expansion, spin-offs. You had Angry Birds Go. There was a Mario Kart clone on mobile that was basically Mario Kart, but it was the Angry Birds cast of characters in their own little go-karts. It was a 3D game, man. I think it was even free at the time. You had Angry Birds Epic, which was a social, well, not a social RPG. It was a normal RPG. I think it was, I'm not that really into video games in general, so I don't know the entire terminology of what that kind of what Angry Birds Epic would be technically classified under the wide umbrella of RPG games. I do understand that there are variants. I don't know what that game was, but I know it was an RPG. You had Angry Birds Pop. You had the Angry Birds movies, of course. Endless Angry Birds merchandise, and so on and so forth. But nothing compares to what I was playing in the dark Saturday nights with my cousins. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I love movies, I love cartoons, and I love shows. I've never been a video game guy. I have nothing against it. It's just a hobby, an artistic taste that I was never that introduced to or was pushed, socially or even in my household to really engage with. Furthermore, video games I've played Mario, of course, as everybody does, but it was never a thing for me because my thing was always, more, cinematic, more, other visual mediums, if you know what I mean. My only real first severe, serious fixation with video games was through mobile apps. That was like, considering my relationship with my iPad that I had at the time, which I was locked into that iPad 24/7. I had to play the games. It was the thing to do. What else was I going to do? Go on 4chan at the age of 17? 17. Just kidding, I was 13. But dude, sure, it's a mobile app. I think it was free, actually. But I played some of them. I've gone through The Last of Us 1. I've gone through The Last of Us 2. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I love Mario platformers. I loved Angry Birds Trilogy on Wii. I do like video games. It's not really a hobby that I really have any interest in developing or to really expand my taste in, which of course that opinion might change in the future. Nothing will ever top my incredibly subjective experience that I witnessed when I was around 12 or 11 with Dark Echo. Dark Echo was, in hindsight, a minimalistic survival horror game on the App Store. I believe you can still download it, although I don't really know if it's free anymore. And I fell in love with the gameplay and the aesthetic and the sheer setup of the game. It was just a black screen, and you would slowly have to meander and walk across this completely darkened room, and the only way for you to maneuver yourself would be through sound or noises. And the sounds, noises, would be emanating from your footsteps. Maybe you could hear water droplets across the room to indicate that maybe there's the exit over there. But it was all black. The sounds would be visually represented with little wave lines. You would slowly walk. You would just repeatedly have to tap on the screen, and then you would slowly, pitter-patter your way, left, right, up, and down to try and find a way out. And if you made enough sound, you could hold onto the screen, and once you released, it would clap. And the gigantic wave of white circles or, wavelengths, I don't even remember what they were. And they would bounce across the entire screen, showing you the visual representation of the actual room you're in. The more noise you make, the more you get to know what's your surroundings. Daredevil style, basically. Basically, kind of like echolocation. You can see if you hear. The problem is, normal sounds would be white. Red sounds represented danger. You made a lot of noise. The noise would bounce across the room. And if it hit him, you would see these little red footsteps coming towards you. You would either waddle over to the corner and hope to God the white little sound waves don't hit this guy, indicating where you are. Because if you did, he would catch you. And the screen would burst into a heap of red sound waves, concluding with a violent scream, indicating your demise. Replay. That replay button was clicked so many times at 1 a.m. with my cousins when we blasted that game at full blast with our headphones. It was incredibly simple, but the setup to me was so incredibly interesting. It pretty much plays around with a lot of, it's a very creative game. The premise is really original. And it really resonated for me. It might have been the filmmaker side of me where I was appreciating, the nuances of it playing with, sound and, representing sound into a visual medium, and also the interactivity of it being a mobile game and whatnot. That probably had a factor in it, but I kind of want to download that game again, but I also know that I'm probably going to be disappointed because, the pink glasses are already over there. And I kind of like, keeping to that impression or that whimsy of, I kind of like just having that memory as a memory in that particular period of time with that game. And I don't really want to alter it with the reality of what maybe that game is now. Maybe the game is different. Maybe the game isn't as good as I thought it was. Maybe it's boring. Who knows? But that was the game to play in my household at the time. Do you remember? Okay. Talking Tom. Once again, the one-time gimmick apps, the more simpler, the more better. The simpler, the better. Talking Ben, Talking Angela, which, by the way, at the time, so anyway, what am I talking about? So Talking Tom was basically this 3D model of a cat that would link up to your microphone on your smartphone for you to say dialogue in front of it, say speeches like hello, and then he would repeat it into a chipmunk voice, hello. And all the uncles and aunts at the time went crazy for Talking Tom. It developed spin-offs in its own little franchise. Talking Ben, it was a dog. Talking Angela, the canonical girlfriend of Tom, it was a cat. And I remember, this is probably going to be a subject later in the video. I'll bring this up briefly, but I remember just, there was this whole different subgenre on YouTube of just people screen recording, all the random BS that they would have Talking Tom say. Dude, it would get like hundreds of thousands of views. The internet was incredibly different at the time. And I remember there was like a crossover app. It was a news broadcast game, but I think it could allow you to upload videos and pictures of your iPhone or iPad camera roll or photo gallery, and the game would simulate a parody of a news broadcast with the two anchors being, Talking Tom and Talking Ben. And still the gimmick, you would say dialogue, and they would repeat it in a chipmunk voice, or in Ben's case, he would repeat it in a deeper voice, a deeper AI voice, like hello there, blah blah blah, hello there, hello there, hello there, hello there. And you would basically, have little interactions with one of them, and you would make your own little playful, jokey news broadcast of whatever news you felt like the world had to know today. I think it was called the Talking Ben and Talking Tom. I don't even want to know what it was. I also remember there were these animated shorts on YouTube of the Talking Tom characters, but it was like their own little cartoon. I think it was Talking Friends. They might have a different iteration of it currently, because when I Googled it a few years ago, they're still making them, but it's not the same animated shorts that I'm talking about. The ones that I'm talking about, they were called Talking Friends too, but the animation was a lot crappier. And the stories were just, it was the same models that they had in the games. But the new Talking Friends animated show has like cutesier models, if that makes any sense. It was a whole thing, man. It's insane how much large corporations tended to see the most simplest, asininely substanceless apps in the entire App Store as potential multi-million-dollar franchises. Why does a Doodle Jump t-shirt exist in Hot Topic? You know what I mean? It's a little weird if you really think, because it was at a time when people would just download near anything if it was free. It's kind of funny, how demanding in contrast gamers or even mobile users can be nowadays, because that market isn't really around anymore. People don't really... It might be the echo chamber talking, of course, but I don't really see people playing that much games on phones anymore. Now we're just, being stimulated by the oh so beautiful algorithm and just feeding us all type of other garbage in our brains. But that did sound pretentious, I know. But I wanted it to sound pretentious. Because it is kind of weird. I mean, it is fake deep. I'm probably trying to make something out of this that's probably not there. I know. It's just kind of an interesting observation that I wanted to share. Anyways,